crazy things happened last night. Of course, the police presence has been sent into university campuses to crack down on the protests and the encampments. The police use excessive force, and I say that in the most polite way possible. And what's even more, crazy about all this is that mainstream media has been addressing this in such a way to obviously put the fault solely on the protesters and not really addressing the way that the police escalated the situation, a rather peaceful situation at most of these campuses. And they chose to focus on the things that I think were honestly disingenuous. We're going to get started with Dana Bash. She has probably been the biggest gaslighter so far since October 7th. We just got to keep it real on this show. Let's get into her comments about the arrest.
Welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Dana Bash. We start with destruction, violence, and hate on college campuses across the country. This was the scene just a short while ago at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Police clashing with protesters. 12 people were arrested. Hours earlier, protests rocked the University of Arizona, where campus police used chemical irritant munitions to remove protesters.
So, with all of these situations that you have seen so far, the police were the ones who came in and escalated the situation. The police. Dana Bash leaves that out.
Around the same time at UCLA, pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian groups were attacking each other, hurling.
Pause. Let's go ahead and debunk this lie. First of all, and you're going to hear from UCLA students that were a part of this. Notice how she explains this event. She said pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel protesters were attacking each other. No, let's explain what really happened. The pro-Palestinian protesters were in their encampments. The pro-Israel protesters attacked them. So you see, this is why CNN's ratings are in the toilet. This is why a lot more people are turning away from mainstream media, because they are not telling you the truth. Now, I saw a lot of this stuff all day yesterday and last night. So the same way I can come on this show and I can tell you what happened, so can Dana Bash. But that is not what Dana is paid to do.
All kinds of objects, a wood pallet, fireworks, parking cones, even a scooter. And before that, the NYPD was able to clear Columbia University after protesters barricaded themselves inside a campus building. 300 people were arrested at Columbia and City College of New York. But it is unclear how many were actually students. New York City Mayor Eric Adams warned this morning that professional outside agitators are getting involved.
So that is an exaggeration. So you see what they're trying to do? They're trying to make the public believe that most of these people weren't even students, that they were just random people that just came onto the campus and decided to become a part of these protests. That is actually not true. That is false. Dana Bash is lying because, again, Dana Bash works for a network. It's corporate media, it's mainstream media, and they have a narrative that they are supposed to portray. Dana Bash comes into work every day and she reads a script. And honestly, I don't know how a lot of these people sleep at night. She should be ashamed of herself. She should be embarrassed because you come on to CNN every time and tell countless lie after lie after lie.
There is a movement to radicalize young people, and I'm not going to wait until it's done and all of a sudden acknowledge the existence of it. This is a global problem. That young people are being influenced by those who are professionals at radicalizing our children. And I'm not going to allow that to happen as the mayor of the city of New York.
So who is Eric Adams to tell the students what they can believe in? Right? So who voted for this guy? Let me know if you're watching. Did you vote for this guy? I told you from the very get-go, it was a terrible idea to put a cop in charge of the city. Who voted for this guy? Young people are not stupid. Young people don't have to be influenced. They are very resourceful. I worked with this generation. I worked with college students for over 10 years. I didn't have to influence them. I didn't have to teach them anything in reference to how they should think and what they should feel. These kids are very resourceful. They have the internet at their fingertips. They grew up with social media. A lot of us did not. They're doing their own research. What Eric Adams is really telling you is that the kids are not buying the narrative from mainstream media and the State Department, and that's what he has a problem with.
Many of these protests started peacefully with legitimate questions about the war, but in many cases, they lost the plot. They're calling for a ceasefire. Well, there was a ceasefire on October 6th, the day before Hamas terrorists brutally murdered more than 1,000 people inside Israel and took hundreds more as hostages.
Do you see the way that she's framing this? There was a ceasefire before October 6th. So Dana Bash, she's another one. Okay, you got to know about where she comes from and how she got that job at CNN. She's another one that comes from privilege. Look up her family and you'll see what I'm talking about. But for her to say that there was a ceasefire before October 6th, that is an absolute lie. There have been conflicts. There have been attacks between Israel and Gaza and the West Bank way before October 6th. And we've talked about it on this show. She won't mention to you that Israel was attacking Lebanon and Syria as well. Of course not. She has come on to CNN since October 7th. She has come on to CNN and she has told lie after lie after lie about October 7th, about the state of Israel. She sat up there right in front of Pramila Jayapal's face and basically told her that it wasn't as important that over 30,000 people have died in Gaza, that it wasn't as important that all those kids died, that it was more important that the Israelis died on October 7th. And if people can't see through what Dana Bash has been doing, I feel sorry for them. She should be ashamed of herself. Honestly, this is not, I would say this is journalistic malfeasance. She should not be a part of this. She has been telling one side of this story, and a lot of the things that she has said have been lies. And she has repeated lies over and over and over to push her narrative.
This hour, I'll speak to an American-Israeli family whose son is still held captive by Hamas since that horrifying day that brought us to this moment. You don't hear the pro-Palestinian protesters talking about that. We will.
You don't hear Dana Bash talk to the Palestinians. So when Max Blumenthal told you that there are a number of people that work for CNN, some of them like Wolf Blitzer, for example, worked with, AIPAC. Some of them worked with ADL. Like all these people, all this stuff is connected. But it's not just Dana Bash. Because you have Nutso, Chris Cuomo over here. And I want you to hear what he said about the protesters. And I want to show you something about him, right? Listen to this.
Everyone seems to see what they want to in these college protests. Too many are using them to advance their own agendas. But this is too important to play games. It is a time to say what you are about, what you think about what is happening, why it's happening, and what you believe must be done now. Look, tonight, here, you're going to hear people play to advantage with these protests, but they will be tested. This is not some fake impeachment effort. This is not some political prosecution. Kids are being radicalized in a way that poses a true national security threat.
Pause. Do you know another time when mainstream media made that statement about younger people being radicalized besides the Bernie Sanders campaigns? I'm talking about way before then. The civil rights movement. Now, Chris Cuomo left CNN, but CNN didn't leave him. He's a part of News Nation. News Nation is still corporate. It's a part of Nexstar. Nexstar owns News Nation and The Hill Rising. But Rising is a different format than News Nation. News Nation is supposed to be middle of the road, right? People have a right to be radicalized if they want to. People have a right to believe in what they want to believe, whether you agree with it or not. That is part of the problem. But Chris Cuomo is criticizing these protests and saying these students are radicalized. Well, if you look back in history, you look at some of the video footage, people said the same thing about the civil rights protesters, that they were being radicalized. The kids that were going to Elvis's concerts were radicalized. If you were dancing to the Beatles, you were radicalized. If you're traveling to other countries that the US government finds to be offensive or problematic, you're being radicalized. But what does that really mean within itself, people? These are the questions we need to ask. These people want you to be a part of the status quo. They don't want you to be too far to the left. They don't want you to be too far to the right. Anything outside of that center, that status quo, they find problematic. Now, I'm sitting up here asking these questions because what would Chris Cuomo have said during the civil rights movement if he was a newscaster? What would he have said? Oh, we're supposed to think that he has the right, he would have the right thing to say. We have to look at what he is saying now. These kids, most of those protests were peaceful. How is that radicalized? Let him continue. He goes on.
This isn't my opinion. This was the warning given months ago by the head of the FBI, and he was right.
Oh, so the FBI, folks. They want you to trust the government agencies. They want you to trust the FBI, trust the CIA, the same FBI that was a part of the death of Malcolm X, of Martin Luther King. That FBI, that's who he wants you to trust and believe.
So who is paying for these protests? Who is planting all this BS on social media that is absorbed uniquely by who? Younger people, the same ones protesting. Who will step up and make the case and expose the malignancy and assure Jewish Americans that they too are valued and safe? I don't see.
Pause. So here's something that he's leaving out and that Dana is also leaving out. And Chris Cuomo knows this, so this is intentional as well. A lot of the protesters, a lot of the pro-Palestinian protesters are Jewish students. Notice the way the media is framing the protest. They make it sound like all the protesters on the pro-Palestinian side are not Jewish. That is false. I mean, I don't know what else to say here, but the framing is horrible. Horrible. How is this any different from the same way that Fox News talked about the BLM protest? Why is Chris Cuomo focusing on the two events that were violent? One of them because the police came in and actually escalated the situation. Why is he choosing to focus on that instead of focusing on all the peaceful protests that happened across these campuses? Didn't CNN, when he was on CNN, didn't they criticize Fox News for doing just that? So it goes to show you once again, when it comes to these networks, it doesn't matter if it's a liberal network or if it's a right-wing network. Both have a problem with you not following the status quo.
See the arrests and skirmishes as a spectacle to get your attention. I may be kept late tonight to watch it. I don't know that it's the best use of our time. What do you think is going to happen when people are illegally occupying areas on a private property?
Pause. So this is the gotcha moment. Chris Cuomo and the Don Lemon is being told off for this too on Twitter for his comments. People who saying they're not protesting peacefully, which has been a lie. People like Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon saying that they don't have the right to occupy property. Okay. In that instance, Chris Cuomo would have had a problem with the strategies and the methods that were used during the civil rights movement. During the civil rights movement, and you can't tell me he doesn't know about this, but during the civil rights movement, there were sit-ins. Let's say this again. During the civil rights movement, there were sit-ins where protesters went into restaurants, went into businesses, and sat down and occupied that space. Don Lemon is guilty with this here. Chris Cuomo is guilty with this as well. So according to that rhetoric, he would have had a problem with the civil rights protests. He also would have had a problem with the protest against apartheid South Africa. Remember, the divestment movement against apartheid South Africa, that hall, Hamilton Hall, was occupied by the students, just as it is this week. So he would have had a problem with that as well. That's what a sit-in is. But the way that Chris Cuomo is telling this story and the way that Dana Bash is telling this story, they make it sound like this has never happened before. Protests are supposed to disrupt. And I would say they're more effective when they disrupt capital or flow of goods and services. That's the whole point. So you see the way that they're already going about this. We're not going to play the whole thing because it was hard to listen to them even through that part. This is one of the tricks that the media does. There are 10 different propaganda strategies that are used. We're going to talk about 9 and 10. Now, this is shout out to Chris from the No Labels pod. We're going to talk about number 9, and then we're going to go into number 10. I think both of them are in this video because this is very important when we talk about propaganda, ladies and gentlemen. The media. Listen to this.
Number 9. Drawing first blood. In the past, one of the tactics in which propagandists excelled, prior to the rise of social media, was controlling the narrative and being the first to disseminate stories. Leveraging their dominance over legacy media, officially appointed propagandists would craft and circulate fabricated narratives ahead of their opposition's awareness. Whether these stories aimed to distract or deceive, propagandists ensured that the initial focus remained on their falsehoods, effectively stifling the emergence of truth and minimizing its visibility to the public. Number 10.
Okay, we'll get to this one in a second. So do you see that? Being the first to draw first blood. So mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they jump on these stories very quick, even if they don't have all the facts, all the information, and they put the message out first. And then they continue to repeat those stories over and over until it finally sinks into people. There is actually power with repetition. This has been known to work. Even though a lot of these things have been debunked in reference to the beheaded babies, etc. And of course, even the essay story from the New York Times, a lot of these things have been debunked, but they continue to repeat it because the more you repeat it, the more likely people are to believe it. This is number 10. This is what you see happening right now as well. This is a newer thing.
The independent grifter. One of the newest and most insidious propaganda tactics involves cable news hosts who are abruptly removed from their mainstream media positions due to scandals or contract disputes. Beware of these individuals, as they often represent a transition of legacy media propagandists to the growing independent social media community.
That's right. So don't you see this trend happening right now with all the people that have left cable news? So they have Mehdi Hassan up there, but remember, we also got Don Lemon. We also have Tucker Carlson, although Tucker Carlson kind of went to his own little thing, a totally different realm. You got Tucker Carlson. Some people say Mark Lamont Hill, but I would say Mark Lamont Hill was actually, he was still like pretty much based with those views when he was on cable news. So like, for example, he was Green Party voter when he worked for CNN. He was always, correct on Israel and Gaza, even when he worked for CNN. That's why they removed him. So he already was doing those things when he was a part of mainstream media. He might be the exception. The people you need to pay close attention to, though, the Mehdi Hassan, the Don Lemon, even the Tucker Carlson, you got to be careful Because if you notice, I told you Don Lemon left CNN, but CNN didn't leave him. So they may be based on one or two issues, but at the end of the day, you'll notice this can be sort of a grift in the sense that they have convinced you into believing that they are full-fledged independent. And so now they can talk about whatever they want. And now that they draw you in with that, then they continue to repeat the same talking points as mainstream media. Don't you see Don Lemon doing that? Mehdi Hasan does that. Mehdi Hasan's pretty good on Gaza. But other than that, he'll still tell you to vote for Joe Biden. He's not going to tell you withhold your vote and not support the guy who's complicit with the genocide. So is Don Lemon. All these people are going to do these things. I'll let it finish here.
Aware that the era of traditional media is waning, media execs are gradually shifting their focus to social media platforms, forming alliances with tech companies to dominate the independent media space. However, this transition is far from straightforward. One common practice entails crafting a narrative around the cable news host's supposed awakening after experiencing scandal or disagreement, leading them to migrate to a seemingly more independent social media platform. Additionally, propagandists and their organizations orchestrate the emergence of these manufactured content creators. Conclusion.
And then we can come back to that tomorrow. I'm going to save that one for tomorrow because that other piece is really important. So you even have Eric Adams. It's not just the media. So we started with the media, and now you have the mayor. Now you have him complicit in lying as well. So listen to what Eric Adams said.
And another significant part of the video was at the end. That's our flag, folks. Don't take over our buildings and put another flag up. That may be fine to other people, but it's not to me. My uncle died defending this country. And these men and women put their lives on the line. And it's despicable that schools will allow another country flag to fly in our country.
So he thinks it's despicable that students were putting up a Palestinian flag. He doesn't want any other flag to fly in this country except the American flag. However, apparently there seems to be an exception for the Israel flag, because here is Eric Adams right here. You see, he has no problem flying a different flag. We got to call out the hypocrisy, folks. We got to call out the hypocrisy. You see what I mean? See what's happening here? No problem flying another flag. They're all being exposed. And here he is again. So he was caught in a lie. And I want to bring this up as well. He's also lying about the protesters. Eric Adams is asked live on MSNBC about how many non-students were arrested at Columbia. So remember, he started this rumor and he's caught on national television lying.
By all this, but we've heard from your team that there are these nameless leaders who were involved. Can you tell us who they were? Or at least how many of them there are?
Well, first, I always suspected that something was happening, and I'm happy that the confirmation of my suspicion turned out to be accurate when our intelligence division briefed me on two particular individuals. One of them, husband, was arrested for terrorism. As well, some of the paraphernalia and pamphlets that we saw, individuals we saw who were not CUNY students, were there training individuals. We saw the escalation of the tactics that were being used. And so it has been reported on some of the individuals that just stated. I choose not to give notoriety to people who participate in activities like that, but it has been online. The police department has reported, and I'm sure if you reach out to the intelligence division, they'll give you based on the information we want to release. And this is extremely active, continue to evolve, and we want to continue to do the thorough investigations that we have been doing.
So, two people. He knows of two people that were not students, but he made this generalized statement of these outside groups. Two people. Even former CNN commentator Brian Stelter, even he called it out. I've covered lots of this sort of stuff around the world, and I've never seen this many police moving into one area. Yes, it was overkill and it was ridiculous. You don't see police moving in like that to take down people who are murderers. They didn't even show up. Dylan Roof walked into AME Church and killed 9 black people. Did you see the police show up like this and forced to arrest Dylan Roof? Did they drag Dylan Roof across the ground like they did some of these students? There was a student at UCLA who was hit in the head with a rubber bullet that the police shot at them. Meanwhile, Dylan Roof is taken to get food. Make this make sense, people. And it's interesting coming from Brian Stelter, because I'm sorry, Brian, when some of us were calling out the excessive force from the police department, it was people like Brian and his network that made excuses for the police. So I don't even want to hear it. Don't come to me today. There were, aggression. There was things that were said. At these protests. But like I said, most of the protests were peaceful, and they're focusing on the few that had these incidents. But they won't show you this. They won't show you. Notice how the media is painting the narrative that, it was the pro-Palestinian protesters that were violent. That actually is not true. They won't show you this, though.
That's right. Put me on camera. I work for myself. Take off your hijab and get a job. You guys are all fat, ugly, and broke.
Is that how we do?
Take off your hijab and get a job. Why don't you get a job? That's right. Put me on camera. I work for myself. Take off your hijab and get a job.
So that's a pro-Israel protester at UCLA telling the other protesters to take off their hijab and get a job. Then he goes on to call them fat and ugly.
You guys are all fat, ugly, and broke.
Is that how we do?
Take off your hijab and get a job.
But Dana Bash won't show you that, right? This is why we have independent media. And then there was this event at UCLA. Now, this is the one that's also getting a lot of buzz. UCLA clashes. Police criticized for delayed response to violence. But who actually, implemented the violence? If you look at this here, and this one, we're not going to play it because, they'll get me for this. There were actually students. These are the students here. They were attacking the pro-Palestinian protesters that were in the encampment. So the students that were in the encampment, they weren't attacking them. These students showed up in the middle of the night and they were throwing fireworks at those kids. First of all, do you know how dangerous it is to throw a firework at someone? You could kill someone like that. They were doing this. These kids, were they arrested? So do you see, this is why there's criticizing the police. They said, where the hell were you? A mass pro-Israel group assaulted a pro-Palestinian student camp before officers were called to the campus. So this is what I'm trying to show you guys. They are giving certain preferences to certain sides. And when the pro-Palestinian protesters are attacked, the police, they don't care. They do not care. Governor Gavin Newsom spokesperson said the limited and delayed police intervention was unacceptable. But if it had been the other way around, I'm pretty sure those police would have been on time. Very dangerous to throw fireworks at people. Very dangerous. There is a student here who was in the encampment, and he actually talks about what happened at UCLA the other night. Listen to this.
What's up, everybody? So I just got out of the Palestine encampment. I was protecting the encampment from the Zionists. They tried to take a barricade from us, and when I held on, they pulled me into a circle of them, and they started beating me on the back. They threw a rock at my eye. They threw a hammer at my leg. And they slashed my arm, and then they pepper sprayed me in the eyes. So this was with little to no provocation. The Zionists are trying to agitate the Palestine encampment, and I'm not even close to the worst of it. I saw 19-year-old girls with their face completely bloodied and beaten. It is actually. It's almost tear-jerking how violent these Zionists have been to the peaceful protesters on the Palestine encampment. And while you might think that I'm exaggerating, there is no comparison between the two sides as to who has been more violent and who has done more agitating. I'm about to go back, and hopefully we can continue the calls for peace in Palestine and the dismantling of the apartheid regime.
So this is what Dana Bash and Chris Cuomo are leaving out. They're not showing you this. There's also this piece here, which he also posted on TikTok.
The counter-protesters here at UCLA came with rocks and stones and batteries to throw at us. They came with wooden sticks and pepper spray to crush our spirits. But our spirits will not be crushed, and we will not leave until UCLA divests from all companies that have financial ties with Israel. I've never felt more physical pain and emotional and spiritual joy. We will not leave, and our spirits will never be crushed. Spread the word.
So all of those activities are dangerous. Throwing rocks at people, throwing hammers at people, throwing fireworks at people. The kids inside the encampments were inside the encampments. Those other kids came and attacked them. So the narrative that you are hearing from mainstream media, they are omitting has in these protests, who has been the aggressor. Just like they omitted that from October. Who has been the aggressor? We have seen time and time again, the state of Israel has been the aggressor towards the Palestinian people in Gaza and in the West Bank. So after all that, shout out to Assad, because apparently after all that happened, this is UCLA Today. After agitators attacked the encampment last night, every time they attack student protesters, more people join the protests and it spreads. So look at how many people they have now.
In the same manner. And we have unions here in our campus that are ready to take a stance. Give it up. Because UCLA workers, we stand for peace. We do not stand for the war machine.
So you see this? So they actually increased it. Rick C says that's not dangerous, it's criminal. Yeah, because someone could have been killed. I mean, I've seen these things before. You know, there was actually an incident. I think it was an Emerson College student here in Boston, Massachusetts. This was after the Red Sox won. I think it was 2004 after they won. And the riot police showed up and there was apparently, those rubber bullet things or whatever. They were shooting it at the ground, but one of them hit a student in the eye and they died. So those things are very powerful. We also have Yale students. They are actually protesting outside of President Peter Salavi's house, condemning his treatment of student protesters and demanding Yale divest from Israel. So they have come out to the president's house.
We will not rest this close. Divest. We will not stop. We will not rest this close. Divest. We will not stop. We will not rest this close. Divest. We will not stop. We will not rest this close. Divest. We will not stop. We will not rest.
So I guess the president of Yale got a wake-up call. And that's something else I want to mention too. These students aren't just camping out just to camp out. They have demands. The demands are that the universities divest away from Israel, that they divest from the weapon contractors that they have these contracts with. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, even in this country now, I don't know if you guys know this, but certain companies in the South, you can't even get a government contract with unless you pledge some type of alliance to Israel. Like, what is happening here? So it's all kind of connected. Now, there was one mayor who was confronted on video, and that was Mayor Wu of Boston, who was confronted by one of the students who wants to know why she did not do anything when the police assaulted the students that were protesting at Emerson. So listen to this. And I've spoken with her in person too. So one thing I would say, if you do confront her, she will answer you until her assistants pull her away.
And I'm a primary care provider. This is really hard to talk about. I was at the Emerson.
Oh, sorry, excuse me. This is a primary care provider. So listen to this. He was at the Emerson encampment.
I saw students, black and brown students, get grabbed by the neck. They put their leg in front of their feet and slammed their face into the ground. I saw them in jail support. They were bleeding. Two of them said that they were bleeding so much, they asked for medical care. They were told they would get medical care, and they did not. They never got it. They never, ever got it. Ayanna Pressley has come out on this. I don't understand why you have not been able to say anything. You went up against Marty Walsh when you talked about protecting organizers and activists. You berated him for not passing a law to prevent excessive use of force. And then you cooperated with the police. You told them to go and sick them on these kids for peaceful protest.
She sure did. And I'm glad he's calling her out for it. Remember, it was the mayor who gave that order. Now, I'm seeing these cops, and this is what I said before. I've seen videos of these cops slamming kids on the ground. You would have thought these kids murdered someone. The way that they responded to them, it was excessive, it was abusive, it was over the top, it was uncalled for. And Mayor Wu, who's supposed to be one of the people, particularly when she was running for office, this is something that she was supposed to straighten out, that protesters and organizers were going to be protected and that those things would not happen to them. But she was the one who sicked the police on those kids, and then she was nowhere to be found. Someone could have seriously been injured.
It's a genocide. Him is 6 years old. She was in the car. The tanks surrounded her. They sent aid workers. They shot her, a 6-year-old child, and then they shot the aid workers, right? What are we supposed to do? We're supposed to sit back and just assume that our leaders will say something? Well, we tried that. 200 days, they've said nothing. All you've done is sick the police and then say, after the police brutalize our students, black and brown students. It was so fucking painful to see what those kids went through. They will be scarred for life. I was there. Were you there? Did you go? Did you one time go?
I was not there.
Yeah, I know, because I was there and we never saw you. And then you were taking the word of what the police are telling you? You know better. You've heard the thoughts. You've heard how they've done different to black and brown people. We're people of color. They're using us to break apart and go up against people we have more in common with. It is utterly disgusting what you've done. We cannot forgive you. We're healthcare workers. We're going to organize hard against you.
She is mayor now. So the whole people of color thing, you know, she really pushed that when she was running for office. But now it doesn't matter to her because she already got the position. Once she's done with this position, I don't think she's going to run for re-election. Once she's done with this position, remember, she's a Harvard graduate. She'll probably get some cushy job somewhere working for some freaking, I don't know, consultant or something like that. And she'll write a book.
Why didn't you show up? Why didn't you show up and come and talk to people?
I'm there just as an age.
Oh, now she got to go. She got to go. They got to move her along. Thank you so much for confronting her. Let's go to part 2, Eric, for the VNC. Thank you so much for confronting her. And now we're going to get to something else that happened last night that connects all this as well. Or do we have Tom Cotton first? We got Tom Cotton first. I forgot about him. I know this is a long story, but you got Tom Cotton out here actually calling the protesters little Gazas, like he's smearing these kids. Look at this.
We're here to discuss the little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America and the liberal college administrators and politicians who refuse to restore law and order and to protect other students. These little Gazas are disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate, full of pro-Hamas sympathizers, fanatics, and freaks. The terrorist sympathizers in these little Gazas aren't peacefully protesting Israel's conduct of the war. They're violently and illegally demanding death for Israel, just like their ideological twins, the Ayatollahs in Iran.
So you guys saw who was actually being physically violent, right? But he's calling the rhetoric violence, but he's not calling out what the pro-Israel protesters have done to those kids. Want to see why? Because Tom Cotton is another puppet. Tom Cotton receives over $237,000 from the pro-Israel lobby. These people, that's what I'm trying to tell you, they don't care about these people. He don't care about those kids. He don't care about that. Tom is doing what he is paid to do. And you can find this with all of them. Every single one of them that's speaking in such a way. Called them disgusting. And then here's Joe Biden. We'll finish it up with this part here because he actually did speak out about it.
So let me be clear. Peaceful protest in America. Violent protest is not protected. Peaceful protest is. It's against the law when violence occurs. Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law. Vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest. Threatening people, intimidating people, instilling fear in people is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law. Dissent is essential to democracy, but dissent must never lead to disorder or to denying the rights of others so students can finish the semester and their college education.
Finishing the semester and your college education is more important than a genocide that is happening right now. So those kids can learn those classes online just like they did during the pandemic. It's already May. The year's almost over anyway. So you see what they are prioritizing. What is more important here?
Look, it's basically a matter of fairness. It's a matter of what's right. There's the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos.
So again, false narrative. Giving people the impression that the pro-Palestinian, that those encampments were violent. They were not. You have to understand, I've said this before, that these colleges are a business. They are a business first, foremost, above anything else. The best thing that you can do as a student and something that actually will not cause an arrest is for you to stage a massive walkout across this country. The police can't arrest you for walking out of class. They can't make you go to college. Like, that's the thing. A massive walkout from all these universities across the country. No students in the seats. No professors getting paid. No professors getting paid. No deans getting paid. No president of these universities getting paid. Do you guys know the president of Columbia University is one of the richest people? Do you guys know how much money this person, the president of Columbia University, makes $2,000, I think it's every hour? Or 20 minutes. I have to look it up. She makes more than a working class person will ever make in 1 year. She makes in 1 week. But they're businesses. So in order to get these presidents to listen, you have to shut the business down. And the best way that you can do that is going to be not going to hurt you physically with the police, is to walk out. This guy understands it. Listen.
The reason universities don't crack down on white supremacist marches is because those do not affect their bottom line. That's it. There's no other reason. They don't care. I heard somebody put it, universities are now banks that teach classes on the side. And as long as nothing hurts them enough to affect that, everything else is PR. Because in the end, a couple hours of marching changes about as much as appeals to morality and ethics through proper administrative channels for divestment from Zionism. Israel is a U.S. proxy colony in the Middle East. We use them as a money printer, war laboratory preying on the indigenous Palestinians. It's an avenue of money laundering, infosec, espionage, theft, either direct or indirect, of essential resources like rare minerals and fossil fuels. And all that is in turn fueled by STEM grads of American universities, who are the beneficiaries of massive corporate and federal funding, like from Boeing, Lockheed Martin, the Department of Defense, and the NSF. This creates a symbiotic relationship several orders of magnitude more profitable than things like arts, humanities, critical thinking, and community building. In other words, the average administration will view investment in war profiteering and by proxy Zionism as essential to the survival of their employer. In other words, they need it for their paycheck, as they believe they have no choice but to crack down on every encampment by whatever means they feel they can get away with in order for their institute to survive.
He's 100% spot on. These universities have become banks that just teach classes on the side. And it didn't used to always be that way. And then we run into this recent issue, and this is all connected. So now they have put out this piece of legislation, this passed in the House. And I want you to see how this is going to affect these universities. Shout out to Solomon for breaking this down for everybody. The House approves bill to defined anti-Semitism. So they changed in this definition. Is 320 to 91, right? So listen to this. These are some of the examples that will apply in public life, the media, school, workplace, and in religious sphere could take into account overall context, include, but are not limited to. Calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or an extremist view of religion. So I haven't heard anyone do that. But what they're doing is they are now saying that certain words that are being used is calling for that, or certain phrases, making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews as such, or the power of Jews as a collective, such as especially but not exclusively the myth about the world Jewish conspiracy, or of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or other societal institutions. Again, I haven't heard any one of these protests saying anything like that. Accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group, or even for acts committed by non-Jews. Again, haven't heard about denying the fact, scope, mechanisms, or intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of the National Socialist Germany and its supporters or accomplices during World War II, the Holocaust. Again, I have not heard this rhetoric at those protests. Accusing the Jews as a people or Israel as a state of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust. Haven't heard these things. Accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interest of their own nations. See this one right here? This is the one that could get people into trouble. It goes on to say, denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor. Everybody see what's happening here? Pay close attention, folks. Applying double standards by requiring of it a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. That one's vague. Using the symbols. This is the one that I think Christians need to ask about. Using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, e.g., claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel, to characterize Israel or Israelis. So what does that mean in reference to Christianity? And that makes you wonder too about some of the movies that exist. Does that mean that Passion of the Christ is going to be banned? We got to ask these questions because some of this is kind of vague. Let's go on. Drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. Y'all see this? Holding Jews collectively responsible for actions of the state of Israel. And again, I don't think people have been saying that at the protest. People have been criticizing the government, the Israeli government, and of course, the U.S. for funding it. And last but not least, anti-Semitic acts are criminal when they are so defined by law. For example, denial of the Holocaust or distribution of anti-Semitic materials in some countries. So some of this may even be criminal. So this right here, folks, actually had, when I was online last night, this one actually stirred up Democrats and Republicans, because there were Christians that were on social media and they were like, wait a minute, what does this mean for me? So I don't think that this legislation is actually going to make things better. I think this legislation is actually going to make things worse.